The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
You're the perfect blend of elegance and style, and your ride should be no different. The 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid meets all your needs, from business to brunch and everywhere in between. With head-turning details like a sleek front end, plus stylish interior, and an available 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and seamless tech integration. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more about the new 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid.
This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Hello and welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast that's going to the National Championship Tournament. I'm your host, Auburn Elvis. Let's talk about some college equestrian. Now, we didn't have any meets this past week because we only have the national championships ahead of us. We already talked about the final NCEA rankings and who got invited to Ocala, so now let's take a look at the first round matchups with some meet previews. All right, first off, we got Thursday coming up. We got number 1 versus number 8, UT Martin. Now, I don't hold out a lot of hope for the Skyhawks here. They just don't match up well against SMU. In fences, UT Martin has one rider above 50% in her career wins percentages in fences, and SMU has 4 riders that are 50% or better in their career wins. So depending on how the random draw shakes out, this could be 3-2 SMU, or it could be a 5-0 sweep for the Mustangs. I'll be generous and I say this one just goes 4-1 for SMU here. Over on the flat, UT Martin looks a little stronger here. They've got 3 riders above 50% career wins, but all 5 of SMU's riders average over 50% with their career wins, so this might be more of the same. Again, I'm going to be generous and I'm going to say this is a 3-1 SMU win here in this event. Horsemanship, 3 UT Martin riders average over 50% with their career wins. All 5 of SMU's can say the same, so I think we're going to see another 3-1 advantage for SMU. Reining. Now, this is UT Martin's chance to shine. They've got 4 riders over 50% in their career winning percentage. SMU has 4 as well, but UT Martin's riders tend to do a little bit better, so we're going to say this event goes 3-2 for the Skyhawks. Again, might be a little generous there, but that's what the stats suggest. Add all that up, and I think we're looking at about a 12-6 SMU win, at least. It might be more. Another quarterfinal to look at, number 2 Auburn versus number 7 Georgia. First, we'll look at fences. This is Auburn's bread and butter, okay? All 5 riders were All-Americans this season, and the worst of which, she averages 60% wins in her career, and that's the worst one. She's dang good. For Georgia, they're no slouch here either. They got 4 riders with career winning percentages over 50, but only one of them is more victorious than Auburn's worst starting fences rider, so Auburn should get some points here. They could sweep this. They could win 3-2, but let's just say that the Tigers win fences 4-1. Over we go to the flat. This is kind of the reverse of fences. Here, Georgia's worst starter averages 54% for her career, which Auburn, they aren't bad, they're just not as good as Georgia. The Tigers have 3 riders averaging over 50%, so this is Georgia's chance to shine. The Bulldogs could sweep this, or they could only win it 3-2, so we'll say that they win 4-1. Over we go to horsemanship. All 5 of Auburn's riders average over 50% wins with their careers. For Georgia, they have 2 riders averaging 50% career wins. One note here, in the other spring meets for Georgia, back when I was estimating what their points production would be, I kept including a rider that they had in the fall and is no longer with them in the spring, and she was their best horsemanship rider. So I was basically overvaluing how good that they tended to do in horsemanship here in the spring. Without her, their points production in this event drops by almost a full point because she averaged 80% wins just by herself, and the rider that they replaced her with has yet to get a win. Now just watch, after I say this, she's probably going to go out and get a win against Auburn, but anyway, the stats look good for Auburn in this event. I say that the Tigers are going to win 3-2. Reining, our last event. Okay, this is a box of chocolate events. You got no idea what you're going to get. The stats favor Auburn. 4 of the Tiger starters average over 50% wins in their careers, whereas Georgia, only 2 can say the same. So I'll say that Auburn wins this one 3-2. And if all that happens, we're looking at an 11-9 Auburn win. It's also worth pointing out that in this scenario, Auburn's Western team would have won 6 points. Now, this is very significant because the primary way that teams beat Auburn is to stifle their Western squad. Now, this past weekend, I went back over all of Auburn's losses since that undefeated 2020 campaign, and they had 17 losses to date since that year. The Western team averages about 3.5 points in those losses. Now, they average more in the wins, obviously, but in the losses, that's what they do. So if Auburn gets about 4, 5, maybe 6 points in the Western squad, they're probably going to win. One other interesting note, the Western team actually does worse at a neutral site meet, or at least at a neutral site loss, than they do at an away meet that they end up losing, which is just very weird because normally you wouldn't do as well on an away meet. That's what holds for the jumping seat and for most teams, but for some reason, the Western team, when they go to a neutral site, they just don't do very well. So we'll see if that changes for Auburn this weekend. But the flip side here is if Auburn's Western squad has a good day, the whole team is probably going to have a good day. So we'll see how that goes. Another quarterfinal to look at. Number 3, Oklahoma State going up against number 6, Texas A&M. Now, I'm going to say that the stats actually favor Texas A&M here. Now, you might recall that I rarely had Oklahoma State ranked as highly as the NCEA voters did, and this is why. The stats say that they just aren't as powerful of a team as Texas A&M. But is that going to matter once they get down to Ocala? We're going to see. But here's what the stats suggest is going to happen. Fences, Oklahoma State, they got 3 riders over 50%. But 2 of those are better than anybody on A&M's lineup. Texas A&M has all 5 fences starters over 50% for their career, so we're going to say that A&M wins this one 3-2. In the flat, Oklahoma State has 3 riders over 50%. A&M has 4 over 50%, so we'll say that A&M wins this one 3-2 as well. Over we go to horsemanship. Oklahoma State has 4 riders over 50% with their winning percentage for the careers, and one of them is just real good. A&M has 4 over 50% as well, but I think Oklahoma State's going to win this one 3-2. Now let's look at reining. Oklahoma State has 4 riders over 50% for their career. A&M has 4 or 5, depending on who they put out there. And we're going to give a slight edge to A&M and say they win this one 3-2. If all that happens, then Texas A&M would get the upset, although I don't think it's that much of an upset, 11-9. So we'll see if that goes down. One more quarterfinal to look at. Number 4 TCU versus number 5 South Carolina. The Gamecocks made the stats look real silly 2 weeks ago. Can they do it again? Probably not. In fences, both teams have a pair of over 500 career winners, so we're just going to say this is a 2-2 tie. In the flat, both teams have 4 career 50% or better riders, but South Carolina, they win a little bit more, so I'm going to say South Carolina wins this one 3-2. Horsemanship. Everyone in purple is a horsemanship queen in this one. All 5 Horned Frogs win over half the time, whereas only 2 Gamecocks can say the same, so I think TCU wins this one 3-1. Reining. We have 4 TCU riders over their 500 for their careers. Only 2 South Carolina riders can win that much. But the other 3 are just a hair below the 500 mark, so it's going to be close. I think TCU wins this event 3-2. Add all that up, and I think we'll have TCU winning 10-8. So to recap, I think the favorites to advance out of the quarterfinals would be SMU, Auburn, Texas A&M, and TCU. Over we go to Friday. In that first semifinal, that would be the winner of SMU, UT Martin, going up against the winner of TCU, South Carolina. Now, the stats suggest that this is going to be SMU versus TCU, but since we don't know for sure, I'll just quickly roll through this and say we're kind of likely to have about a 9-9 tie with SMU winning the tiebreaker if those are the 2 teams that advance. Over we go to the other semifinal. This is the winner of Auburn versus Georgia going up against the winner of Oklahoma State versus Texas A&M. Now, the stats suggested that this was going to be Auburn versus Texas A&M, and since this is an Auburn podcast, I'm going to go into more detail on this semifinal and how those 2 teams match up. Now, this is similar to how they matched up 2 weeks ago, but that didn't happen because both of them lost in the first round of the SEC tournament. But I have factored in how the riders did there. This is how I think the stats suggest things would break down if they matched up in this semifinal. Fences. Auburn's superstars versus A&M's really talented 5 riders. I'll say that goes 3-2 for Auburn. In the flat, each team's talent takes a step back here, but I think that it would go 3-2 for A&M. Horsemanship. Auburn has 5 good riders here. A&M has 4. I think Auburn would win 3-2. Reining. Auburn has 4 good riders. A&M has 3 good riders, and they also have 2 great riders. I think A&M wins this one 3-1. Add that up, and we would have have a 10-9 Texas A&M upset. Yikes. That is not good, but I will point out that Auburn's Western team would only get 4 points in this scenario, so if that holds true, I think A&M would probably upset Auburn. If Western does better than 4 points, I think Auburn wins. Now, if all of that happens, that would set up a Saturday dual discipline championship between SMU and Texas A&M. Can A&M beat SMU? Yes, but it's not likely according to the stats. Fences would probably go to the Mustangs by a point. Flat would probably go to SMU by a point, maybe 2. Horsemanship would probably go by 2 points to SMU, and reining would probably go to A&M by 2 points. If all that happened, we would have SMU winning their 3rd straight national championship by something like 10-8. So let's look at the single discipline tournament that is going on in Ocala as well. There's only 4 teams in this one, so we're going to start off with our semifinal, which is number 1 Lynchburg going up against number 4 Dartmouth. In fences, Lynchburg has 7 fences rider averaging over 50% for their career wins. So no matter who they start, they're going to have the advantage over Dartmouth. The green only has 3 riders with career winning percentages of 50% or better. They're all good riders. It's just that this is going to go Lynchburg's way overall. Now the green could surprise us, but the stats really like Lynchburg here. I think this is going to be maybe 3-2 in favor of Lynchburg. Over on the flat, things are going to get even more comfortable for Lynchburg, most likely. The Hornets have 6 riders over 50% career wins, and 2 of them are actually averaging a whopping 80%. Winning percentage. Conversely, Dartmouth has 1 rider at exactly 50% career wins. Two more are just a little bit under that, so Lynchburg could win big here. I think maybe 4-1. Add that up, and I think we'd have a 7-3 Lynchburg victory. Over we go to the next semifinal. For the single disciplines, we've got number 2 Sweetbriar going up against number 3 Charleston. Boy, this is going to be a close one, y'all. In fences, Sweetbriar has 4 riders over 50% career wins. Charleston also has 4 riders who can say the same, but 3 of those just ride like dang demons. They win 80% or more. So advantage Cougars. I think this is going to go 3-2 for Charleston. In the flat, all 5 riders of Sweetbriar, they average 50% or better, with one of those up in the 70s for her career wins. On the other side, Charleston, they only have 3 riders with 50% more career wins, but 2 of those win at an impressive 80% rate. So I think each team is going to get at least 2 points here, but I think Sweetbriar would take that last point. So that would make things end up in a 5-5 tie, and since the stats like Sweetbriar just a teeny little bit better, I'm going to say that the Vixens advance. But do not be shocked if it goes the other way. Charleston is that good, and the stats are that close, and I mean, the Cougars could win the whole dang tournament. So we're going to say Sweetbriar advances, but it easily could be Charleston here. So if things happen as the stats suggest, that's going to give us a very familiar rematch of Lynchburg versus Sweetbriar in the national championship meet. The stats say that Lynchburg would have about a 1-point advantage over whether they ride against Sweetbriar or Charleston. But again, they got to prove it in the ring. And frankly, any of the 3 teams of Charleston, Sweetbriar, or Lynchburg could end up your national championship in this tournament. The stats just suggest that it's going to be Lynchburg and that it would be a 5-4 victory over Sweetbriar. So the stats like SMU is the dual discipline champion and Lynchburg is the single discipline champion, just like it happened last year. But like I said, I'll be there. Although I will say that if Auburn loses early, I always get a little depressed. I don't go out and do as much stuff after that. I still cover things. I just, don't want to let my inner turmoil show. So I try to, reduce a little bit of the live content. Also, the suit gets real uncomfortable by day 3. So I sort of go incognito and I switch into, my civilian attire. And I kind of stealth cover the last few meets. We'll see how it all goes. Maybe Auburn gets hot. Maybe the Western riders just start bagging points like it's Halloween candy. And yeah, we'll see. All right, one more order of business. By the time this podcast comes out, I will have been a guest on that other college equestrian podcast, WEQ Weekly. Madison Buchanan and Reagan Rast invited me on their show this week to rant about all the injustices in the college equestrian world, and a shout out to them for being brave enough to do that. Search for WEQ Weekly on your favorite podcatcher and give it a listen. All right, well, the next time you tune in, we will have some national championship action to talk about. I am your host, Auburn Elvis. Well, thank you very much for listening, and war horses.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.